And you can hear me okay? All right. So I want to welcome you all to a community reading of banned books. I am Barbara Shatera. I'm a librarian here at the Fletcher Free Library, for that one person out there who doesn't know me. I just want to say a couple things about Banned Book Week, which happens at libraries around the country, and it has for about 30 years. Back in the 1980s when this started, it followed the Supreme Court decision called Island Trees School District versus Pico, which ruled that school officials can't ban books in libraries simply because of their content. And as we obviously are living through a very contentious time period where people have very strong opinions on a number of things, this is a period of time where censorship becomes all the more of a clear and present danger, and the decision of libraries and schools around the country to be very thoughtful about their decision making around challenged books is all the more important. It goes on. It's been going on for a lot longer than the 30 years we've had a banned book week, and I suspect challenged books will go on in years to come. And oftentimes it's with the best of intentions, but we want to make sure that you have the opportunity as an American to read what you want to read and make your own decisions about what's in those texts. We're going to be reading some of those today here at the library, and many of the books in fact, I believe all of the books that will be read today are in our collection. If you are interested in borrowing them, just let one of the librarians know. I'll also have a little shout out for the youth department. Has produced some very nice book finders on various subjects, early chapter books. It sort of gives you a little bit of an idea of what you can find in various subject areas that you might not have known about. So it just makes, we certainly can search our catalog, but it just makes it a lot easier to find what you're looking for. These are available at the circulation desk. You can just grab one, and if you have trouble getting the book, just let any one of us know. We will be happy to get it for you. So welcome, everyone. We have a slate of readers, and but we're going to start off with a keynote talk by Tanya Lee Stone. She's best known for telling the true stories of people that are traditionally missing from our histories, with themes of empowering girls and women threaded throughout the body of work. Girl Rising, Changing the World One Girl at a Time, was her 100th book. That's 100 published books. That's an extraordinary achievement at such a young age. 2 new books are forthcoming: a picture book about Rosalind Franklin, who was never recognized for her contribution to the discovery of the double helix, DNA, and Peace is a Chain Reaction. Her articles, essays, and reviews have appeared in the New York Times, the Hornbook, Publishers Weekly, and School Library Journal. Stone's books have earned multiple awards and honors, including an NAACP Image Award, a Robert F. Siebert Medal, Golden Kite Award, NPR Best Books, and many state awards. Her young adult novel, A Bad Boy Can Be Good for a Girl, which you'll be reading from today, was on ALA's top 10 banned books list, right in between Toni Morrison's Beloved and John Green's Looking for Alaska. Stone is often a featured speaker at festivals, conferences, and schools on the topics of writing, censorship, and global education for girls. And we are delighted, absolutely delighted to have her back here at the Fletcher Free Library. We're going to just take a moment. I'm just going to wipe things down, and then we'll have you come on up. This is kind of like having somebody watch me wash my house.
Barbara and Rebecca for having me. Boy, if I had heard the word keynote, I would have gotten more nervous. So I'm glad I didn't. I guess what I will do today is talk a little bit about the history of this particular book being banned, and what that experience was like and continues to be like, and then do a brief reading. Like Barbara said, I mostly tell true stories. I'm a creative nonfiction author at the heart of most of what I do. But I also just tell stories of empowerment. And this particular novel came about 6 months after I said out loud to a writer friend, I'm not a novelist. And so I actually tell my students, don't say that. Don't say you're not a poet, or you're not a novelist, or you're not a journalist, because you just don't know what might be coming out of your brain next. So I wrote this novel, and it was kind of a commentary and a cautionary tale on things that had been kind of mulling in my brain for 20, 30 years, honestly. And I wanted to tell a story through the perspectives of 3 different girls, all of whom were very different from each other, but all of whom shared a very common experience of kind of being played by a slick guy. There was nothing particularly evil about this guy. He didn't have the characteristics of anyone who was guilty of assault or non-consensual activities or anything like that. He just was, an average 17-year-old guy whose goal was to get away with as much as humanly possible. And so I wanted to kind of look at what that universal experience was, no matter what kind of person people think you are, right? Whether you're the sporty, confident girl, or whether you're the girl who, uses sex for control, or whether you're the free floating like hippie chick kind of girl, it didn't matter. What mattered was this common experience. And also, I didn't want anything bad, catastrophically bad, to happen to the characters for having made the choice of having sex. That was super important to me. So nobody in the book gets pregnant, nobody contracts an STD, nobody, miraculously gets maimed in a car accident right afterwards. All of these sort of tropes that I felt frustrated by in older YA lit. I really wanted to focus on the emotional consequences that we all as human beings face as we navigate this new territory of love and sex, no matter who it's with. So that's sort of the focus of the book. And this book came out in 2006. It's a long time ago, which means I was writing it around 2004, 2005. And it made that top 10 American Library Association banned book list in 2013. And it still gets banned now. So even though there might be some language in the book that might feel dated to me when I read it out loud myself now, it's still hitting a nerve, which is interesting to me. And the experience of being banned was a journey for me in and of itself. So when it first happened, and I would start to get hate mail, often from fathers, calling me names, I think my favorite one was somebody called me a smut peddler. So I would get these letters, these hate letters, and it gave me a stomach ache. Like, I've spent my life wanting to help young people, and working as a teacher with students and working with young writers and writing books for young readers. And so to have somebody, a lot of people actually, come at me for something that I wrote and tell me that I was hurting children was a terrible thing. Until some of my colleagues and friends who had been through it before and much worse than I kind of put it into perspective for me. I do remember the Children's Lit community is a wonderful community. We're all colleagues and friends, and we talk to each other, and we meet each other at conferences, and we share experiences. So when this started to happen, I reached out to a couple of people who I knew had been through it many, many times. David Levithan was one of them. And he said, no, smut peddler, yes, wear it like a badge of courage. Like, you've got this. And when he said that, it really turned it around for me, because I started to think about, what was this about, really? This really had nothing to do with me or my book. It had to do with fear and control. And so the gatekeepers, the parents, the guardians, whomever, are reading books about teenagers having sex, and they're going, no, teenagers don't have sex. Okay. I mean, if you want to believe that, I'm not going to argue with you. But they do, right? So it sort of became easier for me to separate the hate mail, because it wasn't at me. It was at this idea of being afraid about their kids, and worrying about what path that they were on, and if they were going to get hurt, right? And so that is a really common aspect of censorship in the children and young adult world. And it's really quite counterintuitive and opposite, backwards, from what actually happens, right? So what actually happens when kids read about things in books is that becomes an extremely safe place for them to imagine those situations and to put themselves in those shoes without putting themselves at risk. So in fact, all of these issues that can often come up in books for kids and young adults is the opposite of harmful to kids. It's giving them a venue for experimenting without actually experimenting, in many cases. And so that really helped me kind of put it into perspective and not feel badly about it myself, and kind of get the focus off of me and onto the material. And I also think that it's really important to remember that people who write for kids and young adults are writing for kids and young adults. They're not writing for the gatekeepers. Like, they're just not. And I will say that what bothers me when I continue to get these kinds of emails is I feel for the kids on the other side of that conversation. Because the fastest way to shut down communication between a young person and their beloved human is to say, no, don't talk to me about that. No, you're not allowed to pay attention to that. No, that topic is taboo, right? So that's what really pains me when I hear about issues of censorship, especially for these younger readers. I hate to think that there are kids out there who can't talk to the people who love them about the things that they need to talk to them about. So that's really kind of what it's about for me. I think that's really all I have to say on the topic, unless people want to have questions about that. I'm happy to answer questions that are specific to my experience, or in general. And I also thought I would read you a little snippet of this book that got people so upset. This is a young adult novel in verse. So it's a form of poetry that does not rhyme. And it's just a way of telling stories that makes a lot of different topics accessible in a different way than kind of heavy prose, more dense prose. What I I will tell you about this book, as I said, is it's about 3 different girls, Josie, Nicolette, and Aviva, who all date this slick, smooth player guy over the course of a year. Never at the same time. It's consecutive. So there's none of that going on. Therefore it's in 3 sections. The first section is Josie, the second section is Nicolette, the third section is Aviva. And I'm telling you that because I'm going to read you the beginning of Nicolette, and the girl she is referencing is Josie, the first girl. So this is from A Bad Boy Can Be Good for a Girl, and this section just starts Nicolette. Power play. It didn't take a genius to see it. All the girls at my school were always just waiting for some guy to call, waiting for some guy to say she was pretty or nice or smart, waiting for some guy to make the first move. Not me. Why should I sit around and wait? It's all about the power. Who's got it and who doesn't. If I say who, and I say when, and I say what, then I have it. Simple as that. Let's just leave the rest of the lovey-dovey crap out of it, okay? I love the way my body starts to feel when a boy runs his hands all over me, first over my clothes, then getting all under them, appreciating smooth curves and hidden places. I love the way a boy's body feels when he starts to groan from my touch and he squirms and shifts and wants me so bad and tells me so. And I love the time when you know there isn't any place else in the whole wide world that boy would rather be than with you. That's the power. When you're the only thing that matters, the world could come to an end, but the both of you would still be in that happy, drunk but not drunk, it should be illegal for a body to feel this good state of mind. Of course, you won't have any power if people think you're a slut. And if you're a girl and you like to fool around, you can get a bad rep fast. To mess with the rules of the game, you have to know what they are. That's why I usually hang with guys from other schools. Good enough. But there's this one guy at my school I think I'll check out. This girl named Josie is going around telling everybody he's no good. Wanted me to read all about him in the back of some old library book. I'll tell you what though, I think she's just a goody-goody. I have seen this guy and he looks pretty good to me. I mean, real good. Finger-licking good. She probably just didn't know how to take care of him. I've got his number and he's about to get mine. Hey. I walk straight over to him and he's digging for stuff in his locker. Hey. Nicolette, right? That's right. Aren't you the girl who used to hang with Tyler Jones sophomore year? For a second, I worry how he heard about me hooking up with a guy from another school. But I figure a little mystery can be used to my advantage. I fiddle with my top button and give a little sexy smile, like I'm remembering some steamy memory of me and Tyler. Yeah, that's me. How's junior year treating you so far? Can't complain, I say. You and Josie split, huh? I say. You heard about that? Kind of. She told me to stay away from you. But here you are, he says. Here I am. He smiles. I smile back. Want to grab a burger at Paul's later, he says. Okay. And that's how it's done. So that's Nicolette. She's the girl I still worry about. But I gave her a chance later on in the book to kind of contemplate why a girl who does what she wants is called a slut and a guy who does what he wants is called a stud. So we have that conversation in this book as well, kind of hit the little double standard there on the head. So that's sort of what I have to say about censorship. It continues to flourish no matter what we do, it seems. And the thing that I notice the most about censorship, and you also probably notice this yourself, is that the people who are banning books usually haven't read them, right? Like, I can't even tell you how many times I have gotten a complaint through a librarian, and there's this list of things that the people are, saying. It's this, it's that, it's the other. And I'm going, where is that in the book? Like, I don't think that's in there. Are they just lumping it together? Did they just make that up because they're outraged? I don't know. But librarians are the key here, and libraries are the key here. So I will take a minute to talk about that, because my process every time a book is censored or challenged or banned, those are like 3 different levels of what can happen, is to help the librarian fight the fight that he or she is fighting. So I have a little packet of information on this particular book that is fan letters and starred reviews and, you know, award lists and then snippets, anonymous snippets of emails that I've gotten from parents, from readers, from girls saying like, "You're old, how do you know how I feel?" I'm like, yeah, well, this is some universal stuff right here, right? Literally, I have gotten several emails, and that is and it's the funniest thing to me. I'm like, yep, I feel you. I am old, and I still get it, right? And also, I've had some really heartbreakingly touching emails from parents who have used the book as a way to connect with a kid that they are not connecting with. And so, you know, one of their kids has read it and mentioned it, and then the parent goes and reads it, and they engage in a conversation. So I pull all of that stuff together, all of that supportive material, as well as a letter from my editor about why she bought the book, why she acquired it, and why we worked so hard to get this book out in the world. And I send that packet to the librarian who's dealing with the problem, and that tends to help. But there's another sort of part of this issue that comes up too that's a little bit more insidious, and that is the number of challenges that the ALA counts every year is low, because it's only the number that's reported. So what also happens in schools and libraries, as you know, around the country, are people just taking books because they don't like them. And sometimes it's principals, sometimes it's teachers. You know, I have had teachers email me, teachers I don't know from around the country, email me and say, I'm not exactly sure what to do with this information, but I was in my principal's office the other day and your book was on top of a pile of books that he was pulling from the library without telling anybody. So there are all those instances as well. And that just sort of brings me back to this issue of fear. Like, what is everybody so afraid of? I'm not really sure. It's not the books. It's not the words that are hurting people. It's the lack of discussion. It's keeping things locked up and not talking about things. Letting go a little bit and letting your kid figure some things out for themselves and evolve as a human being. So, I mean, I just hope that what the ALA does by having Banned Books Week every year and gathering this data is sort of to continue shedding some light on this topic, so that the numbers go down. I mean, it would really be nice if we didn't need a top 10 banned list books. Book, you know what I'm saying? It would really be nice if we didn't need that. But I guess we do. So that is what I have to say about censorship. If anybody has any questions for me, I would be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you very much. And extra points for the students. Yeah. And if it affected what?
Your creative process.
Oh, it has not affected my creative process. I had written a lot of books before that happened, but none of them were fiction. So nonfiction doesn't tend to get banned very often, I don't think. Is that true? Yeah. It's hard to dispute something that's true, right? Hopefully. Hopefully the nonfiction books are factual. So yeah, that hasn't really been applicable in my particular case. You know, I know a lot of authors who are banned repeatedly. And I don't think it does anything to dampen their creative spirit. It, you know, in fact, I think it probably spurs them on. Like, yes, I'm doing something right, which is what David was trying to tell me. Like, yeah, you're doing it right. If people are complaining because you're talking about something that's tough and you're getting pushback, you're doing okay. Like, as a writer, I don't mean in terms of success. So I would imagine that that's a fairly common response, is that no, it doesn't dampen your creativity. It actually spurs you on. And I know that Judy Blume talks a lot about this, and she used to be on the board of the National Council Against Censorship, of which I am a proud member. And I'm not sure if she still is, but she's very involved in that organization as well. And she's talked about that a lot. You know, like she considers it her duty to continue to press on and be true to the young reader that she's writing for, as opposed to worrying about the gatekeepers who are yelling. Yeah. It's a great question. Yeah. Did what? It is. It's the only fiction book I've ever written, and it's the only book that's ever been banned. Yeah. I was surprised, too. I was surprised that it made the top 10 list. I mean, I knew that the challenges were coming in because I was sending out these packets of information over the years. But that year in particular surprised me because I think it has to be over 300 times within a year to get on that list. That surprised me. There was, that wasn't even the year that it was Cody, Wyoming, but there was a year in the last several years that there was a very volatile event with this book in Cody, Wyoming. Yeah. And we kind of pulled out all the stops to help that librarian. Small town. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Thank you all for your good questions. Our next reader is Mary Dankum. She's the director of the library.
Thank you so much, Tanya. As you were speaking, it reminds me that there's another reason that books are on these banned book lists is because they're often really good books, too. So, thank you. As Barbara said, my name is Mary Danko. I'm the director of the Fletcher Free Library. And I want to tell you, there are people out in this world who don't want you to think. We've seen it in the past, and we see it today. And one of the ways they do this is by controlling what you read. The freedom to read is a cornerstone of our democracy. When we have free access to books and information, we gain knowledge and we become better informed thinkers and therefore better citizens. Critical thinking skills are a core part of our education. And we as librarians are committed to protecting your freedom to read. We stand with booksellers, authors, publishers, and educators in this commitment. Behind me are venerable library stands, and within it, thousands of books. And do I agree with everything that's written in all of these books? Absolutely not. And that's a good thing. Thomas Paine said, "He that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from opposition. For if he violates this duty, this establishes a precedent that will reach to himself." This is why we celebrate Banned Books Week. And I'm glad that you're all here to celebrate it with us. It's a great joy for me. And I am going to read you a book, King and King, which is a picture book. And I'd like to make a little plug to everyone that picture books are for everyone. They're not, my youth librarians are nodding. They are not just for children. So, King and King by Linda DeHaan and Stern Nielyant. On the tallest mountain above the town lived a queen, the young crown prince, and the crown kitty. The queen had ruled for many long years, and she was tired of it. She made up her mind that the prince would marry and become king before the end of summer. "Wake up," called the queen. "We're going to have a little talk, you and I." "I've had enough. You're getting married, and that's all there is to it." The prince pushed away his breakfast. He couldn't eat a bite as the queen talked on and on and on. "I don't understand you. Every prince in these parts is married. Every one of them but you. When I was your age, I'd been married twice already." By evening, all that talking had made the prince dizzy. "Very well, mother, I'll marry. I must say, though, I've never cared much for princesses." "To your future happiness," she toasted. That night, the queen found her list of princesses and called every castle, alcazar, and palazzo near and far. The very next morning, a crowd waited at the gates. Princess Aria from Austria sang a thunderous opera for the prince. No sooner had she finished than she was shown the door. Princess Dolly had flown all the way from Texas with her special magic act. The crown kitty was happy to assist, but the queen and the prince were not amused. Next came the funny little princess from Greenland. The prince didn't hit it off with her either, so he really didn't mind when his page promptly fell in love with her. The next princess had comments. "Boy, those are long arms that will certainly come in handy when waving to the people," said the prince. As fast as her elegant legs could carry her, Princess Rajmashputin from Mumbai stormed out of the palace. The queen and the prince looked at each other sadly. None of this was quite what they had expected. "Wait," called the page. "There is one more princess. Presenting Princess Madeline and her brother, Prince Lee." At last, the prince felt a stir in his heart. It was love at first sight. What a wonderful prince! What a wonderful prince! The wedding was very special. The queen even shed a tear or two. The two princes are now known as King and King. The queen finally has some time for herself, and everyone lives happily ever after.
people, I think. It doesn't make sense to. I think this is gonna last for 3 hours. Yeah. I heard that we're gonna.
Do you want some water?
I'm all set.
Okay, all right. So Ariel Falcon is coming up, and she's one of our student commissioners on the library commission. And I'll let her take it away.
Sorry.
Oh, do you?
have the book?
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Oh, geez.
Let's use this one.
How's everyone doing?
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's a nice day. Yeah, it's not raining. All right. And I'm going to be starting with Cassette 1, Side A. Hello, boys and girls. Hannah Baker here, live and in stereo. I don't believe it. No return engagements, no encore, and this time, absolutely no requests. No, I can't believe it. Hannah Baker killed herself. I hope you're not ready, because I'm about to tell you the story of my life. More specifically, why my life ended. And if you're listening to these tapes, and you're one of the reasons why. What? No. I'm not saying which tapes brings you into the story, but fear not, if you receive this lovely little box, your name will pop up, I promise. Now, why would a dead girl lie? Hey, that sounds like a joke. Why would a dead girl lie? Answer, because she can't stand up. Is this some kind of twisted suicide note? Go ahead, laugh. Oh well, I thought it was funny. Before Hannah died, she recorded a bunch of tapes. Why? The rules are pretty simple. There are only two. Rule number 1, you listen. Number 2, you pass it on. Hopefully neither one will be easy for you. What's that you're playing? Mom! I scramble for the stereo, hitting several buttons all at once. Mom, you scared me, I say. It's nothing. A school project. My go-to answer for anything. Staying out late? School project. Need extra money? School project. And now the tapes of a girl A girl who 2 weeks ago swallowed a handful of pills. School project. Can I listen? She asks. It's not mine, I say. I scrape the toe of my shoe against the concrete floor. I'm helping a friend. It's for history. It's boring. Well, that's nice of you, she says. She leans over my shoulder and lifts a dusty rag, one of my old cloth diapers, to remove a tape measure hidden underneath. Then she kisses my forehead. I'll leave you in peace. I wait till the door clicks shut, and then I place a finger over the play button. My fingers, my hands, my arms, my neck, and everything feels hollow. Not enough strength to press a single button on the stereo. I pick up the cloth diaper and drape it over the shoebox to hide it from my eyes. I wish I'd never seen that box or the 7 tapes inside. Hitting play that first time was easy, a piece of cake. I had no idea what I was about to hear. But this time, it's one of the most frightening things I've ever done. I turn the volume down and press play. 1, you listen. Number 2, you pass it on. Hopefully, neither one will be easy for you. When you're done listening to all 13 sides, because there are 13 sides to every story, rewind the tapes, put them back in the box, and pass them on to whoever follows your little tale. And you, lucky number 13, you can take the tapes straight to hell. Depending on your religion, maybe I'll see you there. In case you're tempted to break the rules, understand that I did make a copy of these tapes. These copies will be released in a very public manner if this package doesn't make it through all of you. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. Do not take me for granted again. No, there's no way she could think that. You are being watched. My stomach squeezes in on itself, ready to make me throw up if I let it. Nearby, a plastic bucket sits upside down on a footstool. In 2 strides, if I need to, I can reach the handle and flip it over. I hardly knew Hannah Baker. I mean, I wanted to. I wanted to know her more than I had the chance. Over the summer, we worked together at a movie theater. And not long ago, at a party, we made out. But we never had the chance to get closer. And not once did I take her for granted. Not once. These tapes shouldn't be here. Not with me. It has to be a mistake. Or a terrible joke. I pulled the trash can across the floor, although I checked it once already. I checked the wrapping again, and a return address has got to be here somewhere. Maybe I'm just overlooking it. Hannah Baker's suicide tapes are getting passed around. Someone made a copy and sent them to me as a joke. Tomorrow at school, someone will laugh when they see me. Or they'll smirk and look away, and then I'll know. And then? What will I do then? I don't know. I almost forgot. If you're on my list, you should have received a map. I let the wrapping fall back in the trash. I'm on the list. A few weeks ago, just days before Hannah took the pills, someone slipped an envelope through the vent of my locker. The outside of the envelope said, "Save this, you'll need it," in red felt tip marker. Inside was a folded up map of the city. About a dozen red stars marked different areas around town. In elementary school, we used those same Chamber of Commerce maps to learn about north, east, south, and west. Tiny blue numbers scattered around the map matched up with business names listed in the margins. I kept Hannah's map in my backpack. I meant to show it around school to see if anyone else got one, to see if anyone knew what it meant. But over time, I slid beneath my textbooks and notebooks, and I forgot all about it. Till now. Throughout the tapes, I'll be mentioning several spots around our beloved city for you to visit. I can't force you to go there, but if you'd like a little more insight, just head for the stars. Or, if you'd like, just throw the maps away and I'll never know. As Hannah speaks through the dusty speakers, I feel the weight of my backpack pressing against my leg. Inside, crushed somewhere at the bottom, is her map. Or maybe I will. I'm not actually sure how this whole dead thing works. Who knows, maybe I'm standing behind you right now. I lean forward, propping my elbows on the workbench. I let my face fall into my hands, and I slide my fingers back into unexpectedly damp hair. I'm sorry, that wasn't fair. Ready, Mr. Foley? Justin Foley, a senior. He was Hannah's first kiss. But why do I know that? Justin, honey, you were my very first kiss, my very first hand to hold, but you were nothing more than an average guy. And I don't say that to be mean. I don't. There was just something about you that made me need to be your girlfriend. To this day, I don't know exactly what that was, but it was there, and it was amazingly strong. You don't know this, but 2 years ago, when I was a freshman and you were a sophomore, I used to follow you around. For 6th period, I worked in the attendance office, so I knew every one of your classes. I even photocopied your schedule, which I'm sure I still have here somewhere. And when they go through my belongings, they'll probably toss it away like a freshman crush has no relevance. But does it? For me, yes it does. I went back as far as you to find an introduction to my story, and this really is where it begins. So where am I on the list among these stories? Second, third, does it get worse as it goes along? She said, lucky number 13 could take the tapes to hell. When you reach the end of these tapes, Justin, I hope you'll understand your role in all of this, because it may seem like a small role now, but it matters. In the end, everything matters. Betrayal is one of the worst feelings. I know you didn't mean to let me down. In fact, most of you listening probably had no idea what you were doing, what you were truly doing. What was I doing, Hannah? Because I honestly have no idea. That night, if it's the night I'm thinking of, was just as strange for me as it was for you. Maybe more so, since I still have no idea what the hell happened. Our first red star can be found at C4. Take your finger over to C and drop it down to 4. That's right, like Battleship. When you're done with this tape, you should go there. We only lived in that house a short while, the summer before my freshman year, but it's where we lived when we had first come to town. And it's where I first saw you, Justin. Maybe you'll remember. You were in love with my friend Kat. She was still 2 months away, and Kat was the only person I knew because she lived right next door. She told me you were all over her the previous year, not literally all over her, just staring and accidentally bumping into her in the halls. I mean, those were accidents, right? Kat told me that at the end of the school dance, you finally found the nerve to do more than stare and bump into her. The two of you danced every slow song together, and soon she told me she was going to let you kiss her. The very first kiss of her life. What an honor. The stories must be bad, really bad. That's the only reason the tapes are passing on from one person to the next, out of fear. Why would you want to mail out a bunch of tapes blaming you in a suicide? You wouldn't, but Hannah wants us, those of us on the list, to hear what she has to say. And we'll do what she says, passing on the tapes, if only to keep them away from the people not on the list. The list. It sounds like a secret club, an exclusive club, and for some reason I'm in it. I wanted to see what you looked like, Justin, so we called you from my house and told you to come over. We called from my house because Kat didn't want you to know where she lived. Well, not yet, even though her house was right next door. You were playing ball. I don't know if it was basketball, baseball, or what, but you couldn't come over until later, so we waited. Basketball. A lot of us played that summer, hoping to make JV as freshmen. Justin, only a sophomore, had a spot waiting for him on varsity. So a lot of us played ball with him in hopes of picking up his skills over the summer. And some of us did. Well, some of us, unfortunately, did not. We sat in the front bay window talking for hours when all of a sudden you and one of your friends, "Hi, Zach," came walking up the street. Zach? Zach Dempsey? The only time I've ever seen Zach with Hannah, even momentarily, was the night I first met her. 2 streets meet in the front of my old house like an upside-down T. So you were walking up the middle of the road towards us. Wait, I need to think. I pick at a speck of dry orange paint on the workbench. Why am I listening to this? I mean, why put myself through this? Why not just pop the tape out of the stereo and throw the entire box of them in the trash? I swallow hard, tears sting at the corners of my eyes. Because it's Hannah's voice, a voice I thought I'd never hear again. I can't throw that away. And because of the rules, I look at the shoebox hidden beneath the cloth diaper. Hannah said she made a copy of these tapes, but what if she didn't? Maybe if the tapes stop, if I don't pass them on, that's it. It's over. Nothing happens. But what if there's something on these tapes that could hurt me? What if it's a trick? Then a second set of tapes would be released. That's what she said, and everyone will hear what's on them. The spot of paint flakes fell off like a scab. Who's willing to test her bluff? Sorry, is there like a time limit? I can just stop kind of whenever.
You're just about. You're right
Okay,
about where you should
I just
be.
want to make sure I don't go over anything like that. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
Abby, you're up next. I'm gonna do a little bit of a voiceover.
Would you like any water?
I'm all right.
Hi, I'm going to be reading the first chapter of The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. Part 1. August 25th, 1991. Dear friend, I'm writing to you because she said you listen and understand and didn't try to sleep with that person at that party, even though you could have. Please don't try to figure out who she is, because then you might figure out who I am, and I really don't want you to do that. I will call people by different names or generic names because I don't want you to find me. I didn't enclose a return address for the same reason. I mean nothing bad by this. Honest. I just need to know that someone out there listens and understands and doesn't try to sleep with people even though they could have. I need to know that these people exist. I think you of all people would understand, because I think that you of all people are alive and appreciate what that means. At least I hope you do, because other people look to you for strength and friendship, and it's that simple. At least that's what I've heard. So this is my life, and I want you to know that I am both happy and sad, and I'm still trying to figure out how that could be. I try to think of my family as a reason for me being this way, especially after my friend Michael stopped going to school one day last spring, and we heard Mr. Vaughn's voice on the loudspeaker. Boys and girls, I regret to inform you that one of our students has passed on. We will hold a memorial service for Michael Dobson during assembly this Friday. I don't know how news travels around school and why it is very often right. Maybe it was in the lunchroom. It's hard to remember. But Dave with the awkward glasses told us that Michael killed himself. His mom played bridge with one of Michael's neighbors and they heard the gunshot. I don't really remember much of what happened after that, except for my older brother came to Mr. Vaughn's office in my middle school and told me to stop crying. Then he put his arm on my shoulder and told me to get it out of my system before Dad came home. We then went to eat French fries at McDonald's, and he taught me how to play pinball. He even made a joke that because of me, he got to skip an afternoon of school and asked me if I wanted to help him work on his Camaro. I guess I was pretty messy, because he never let me work on his Camaro before. At guidance counselor sessions, they asked a few of us who actually liked Michael to say a few words. I think they were afraid that some of us would try to kill ourselves or something, because they looked very tense and one of them kept touching his beard. Bridget, who is crazy, said that sometimes she thought about suicide when commercials come on during TV. She was sincere, and this puzzled the guidance counselors. Carl, who was nice to everyone, said that he felt very sad, but he could never kill himself because it's a sin. This one guidance counselor went through the whole group and finally came to me. What do you think, Charlie? What was so strange about this was the fact that I had never met this man, because he was a specialist, and he knew my name, even though I wasn't wearing a name tag like they do in open house. Well, I think that Michael was a nice guy, and I don't understand why he did it. As much as I feel sad, I think that not knowing is what really bothers me. I just reread that, and it doesn't sound like how I talk, especially in that office, because I was crying still. I never did stop crying. The counselor said that he suspected Michael had problems at home and didn't feel like he had anyone to talk to. That's maybe why he felt all alone and killed himself. Then I started screaming at the guidance counselor that Michael could have talked to me, and I started crying even harder. He tried to calm me down by saying that he meant an adult, like a teacher or a guidance counselor. But it didn't work, and eventually my brother came by the middle school in his Camaro to pick me up. For the rest of the school year, the teachers treated me different and gave me better grades, even though I didn't get any smarter. To tell you the truth, I think I made them all nervous. Michael's funeral was strange because his father didn't cry. And 3 months later, he left Michael's mom, at least according to Dave at lunchtime. I think about it sometimes. I wonder what went on in Michael's house around dinner and TV shows. Michael never left a note, or at least his parents didn't let anyone see it. Maybe it was problems at home. I wish I knew. It might make me miss him more clearly. It might have made sad sense. One thing I do know is that it makes me wonder if I have problems at home, but it seems to me that a lot of other people have it a lot worse. Like when my sister's boyfriend started going around with another girl and my sister cried for the whole weekend. My dad said, there are people who have it a lot worse, and my mom was quiet. And that was that. A month later, my sister met another boy and started playing Happy Records again, and my dad kept working, and my mom kept sweeping, and my brother kept fixing his Camaro. That is, until he left for college at the beginning of the summer. He's playing football for Penn State, but he needed the summer to get his grades right to play football. I don't think that there is a favorite kid in our family. There are 3 of us, and I'm the youngest. My brother is the oldest. He is a very good football player and likes his car. My sister is very pretty and mean to boys, and she is in the middle. I get straight A's now like my sister, and that's why they leave me alone. My mom cries a lot during TV programs. My dad works a lot and is an honest man. My Aunt Helen used to say that my dad was going to be too proud to have a midlife crisis. It took me until around now to understand what she meant by that because he just turned 40 and nothing has changed. My Aunt Helen was my favorite person in the whole world. She was my mom's sister. She got straight A's when she was a teenager and used to give me books to read. My father said that the books were a little too old for me, but I liked them, so he just shrugged and let me read. My Aunt Helen lived with the family for the last few years of her life because something very bad happened to her. Nobody would tell me what happened then, even though I always wanted to know. When I was around 7, I stopped asking because I kept asking like kids always do, and Aunt Helen started crying very hard. That's when my dad slapped me, saying, "You're hurting your Aunt Helen's feelings." I didn't want to do that, so I stopped. Aunt Helen told my father not to hit me in front of her ever again, and my father said this was his house and he would do what he wanted. My mom was quiet, and so were my brother and sister. I don't remember much more than that because I started crying really hard, and after a while my mom had to take me to my room. It wasn't until much later that my mom had a few glasses of white wine and told me what happened to her sister. Some people really do have it a lot worse than I do. They really do. I should probably go to sleep now. It's very late. I don't know why I wrote this down for you to read. The reason I wrote this letter is because I start high school tomorrow, and I'm really afraid of going. Love always, Charlie. September 7th, 1991. Dear friend, I do not like high school. The cafeteria is called the Nutrition Center, which is strange. There was this one girl in my advanced English class named Susan. In middle school, Susan was very fun to be around. She liked movies, and her brother Frank made tapes of this great music that she shared with us. But over the summer, she had her braces taken off. She got a little taller and prettier and grew breasts. Now she acts a lot dumber in the hallways, especially when boys are around. And I think that's sad, because Susan doesn't look as happy. To tell you the truth, she doesn't like to admit she's in advanced English class, and she doesn't like to say hi to me in the halls anymore. When Susan was at the guidance counselor meeting about Michael, she wrote that Michael once told her that she was the prettiest girl in the whole world, braces and all. Then he asked her to go out with him, which is a big deal at any school. They call it going out in high school, and they kissed and talked about movies, and she missed him terribly because he was her best friend. It's funny too, because boys and girls aren't normally best friends around my school. But Michael and Susan were, kind of like my Aunt Helen and me. I'm sorry, my Aunt Helen and I. That's the one thing I learned this week. That and a more consistent punctuation. I kept quiet most of the time, and only one kid named Sean really seemed to notice me. He waited for me after gym class and said really immature things, like how he was going to give me a swirly, which is where someone sticks your head in the toilet and flushes it to make your hair swirl. He seemed pretty unhappy as well. I told him so. Then he got mad and started hitting me. I just did the things my brother taught me to do. My brother is a very good fighter. Go for the knees, throat, and eyes. And I did. And I really hurt Sean. And then I started crying, and my sister had to leave her senior honors class and drive me home. I got called to Mr. Small's office, but I didn't get suspended or anything because a kid told Mr. Small the truth about the fight. Sean started it. It was all self-defense. And it was. I just don't understand why Sean wanted to hurt me. I didn't do anything to him. I'm very small. That's true. But I guess Sean didn't know I could fight. The truth is, I could have hurt him a lot worse, and maybe I should have. I thought I might have to if he came after the kid who told Mr. Small the truth, but Sean never did go after him, so everything was forgotten. Some kids look at me strange in the hallways because I don't decorate my locker, and I'm the one who beat up Sean and couldn't stop crying after he did it. I guess I'm pretty emotional. It has been very lonely because my sister is busy being the oldest one in our family. My brother is busy being a football player at Penn State. After the training camp, his coach said that he was second string and when he starts learning the system, he will be first string. My dad really hopes he will make it to the pros and play for the Steelers. My mom is just glad he gets to go to college for free because my sister doesn't play football and there wouldn't be enough money to send both of them. That's why she wants me to keep working hard so I'll get an academic scholarship. So that's what I'm going to do until I meet a friend here. I was hoping that the kid who told the truth could become a friend of mine, but I think he was just being a good guy by telling. Love always, Charlie.
Thank you both for reading. Our next reader is Jennifer Peak, school librarian from IAA.
All right, hi, I'm Jen, or Miss Jen, and I am the librarian at the Integrated Arts Academy, just over in Old North End. And the book that I picked today is a book that I've been working really hard on increasing our collection for diversity and representation, and have been working with our district's equity office to try to get into classrooms and present these books. And so I'm very excited to read Prince and Knight, written by Daniel Hack and illustrated by Stevie Lewis. And because I am a school librarian, I will show you the pictures. Starting with, very importantly, our end pages, where we get a clue into what's going to happen in our story. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far from here, lived a charming prince who was handsome and sincere. His parents knew that soon it would be time he took the throne, but with a kingdom so grand, the prince could not rule it alone. So the three of them set out and traveled far and wide on a quest to find the prince a kind and worthy bride. The prince met many ladies, and he made them all swoon, but it was soon clear that he was singing a different tune. Thank you, he told his parents. I appreciate that you tried, but I'm looking for something different in a partner by my side. But while the royals were away, their land faced quite a scare. From a dragon fast approaching, breathing fire everywhere. All the villagers ran in fear. Even the soldiers hid and fled. This vicious beast is far too great. We must retreat or we'll be dead. The prince heard the dreadful news and he raced home with all his might. To protect his precious realm, the prince was ready for a fight. Alas, before you fear, our prince had to face the beast alone. Along on horseback came a knight, cloaked in armor that brightly shone. The dragon charged upon our heroes, thinking it had already won. But the knight had had a bold idea and raised his shield to face the sun. The glare hitting the shining metal, blinding the dragon's fiery eyes. But it was what the prince did next that really caught it by surprise. The prince had climbed atop the dragon and tied a rope around its head. He wrapped the cord around the neck and down the body like a thread. The plan had worked. The dragon was caught. Its body was tied and bound. But the prince up high had lost his grip and was falling to the ground. The knight below jumped on his horse and they began to race. The prince was caught and free from harm, held in the knight's embrace. "You saved my life! You saved mine," they said to one another, and in a flash, to each it felt, there simply was no other. The knight took off his helmet to reveal his handsome face, and as they gazed into each other's eyes, their hearts began to race. As the villagers returned, it became clear to those around that the prince's one true love had at last been surely found. The king and queen had come back too, and were overwhelmed with joy. "We have finally found someone who is perfect for our boy." And on the two men's wedding day, the air filled with cheer and laughter, for the prince and his shining knight would live happily ever after.
Our next reader will be Beth Lane. She's a teacher in the Learning Center at Smith Elementary.
Hi, I'm Beth Alberelli Lane. I'm the librarian at CP Smith. And in normal times, we have a banned books display out in our library now when it's full of students. And one book that we have a really hard time keeping on the shelves is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It is out all the time, and students really connect with the fact that someone didn't want them to read this book, especially because of the pictures. And it makes a good connection with them. And for a while, the censors actually managed to get the book printed for a while without these pictures. And we're really glad that the original pictures by Stephen Gamel are back. So I looked for the creepiest picture, and I'll read you this short story. It's just 2.5 pages. The Haunted House. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they would always get scared by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house, went on in, built himself a good fire, lit a lamp, sat there reading the Bible. Then just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar, walking back and forth, back and forth. Then it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and got choked off. There was a lot of thrashing around and struggling, and finally, everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up, laid the book on the chair, and went to tending the fire. Then the haunt started walking again, and step, 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 up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do and then just faded out. The old preacher waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, sat down, and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again, slowly. Step, 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 closer and closer, step, step. It was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held his Bible out before him, and the knob slowly turned, and the door opened wide. This time the preacher spoke quiet-like. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman, about 20 years old, her hair torn and tangled, the flesh dropping off her face so he could see the bones and part of her teeth. She had no eyeballs. There was sort of a blue light way back in her eye sockets, and she had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing it. She told how her lover had killed her for her money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand, lay it in the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. And she said, "If you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church." The haunt sobbed like she was tired and sunk down to the floor and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up, rubbed it, scraped it, tore at that bone, trying to get it off, and then went off to screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him on to jail. After that, the man was hung. The preacher went back to the house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearth rock. He did, and he found a big sack of money. And where that haunt had held on to his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned right into the cloth. It never did come out. My students really know that, and they can articulate that if a second grader checks this book out and it gives them nightmares, then it would probably be good if their mom or dad might say, "Hey, don't check that book out again, it's giving you nightmares." But that parent shouldn't come into the school and say, "No students can read that book," because as one of my third graders told me, the fifth graders might really, really like it. So they totally understand. And 12% of challenged books happen in schools. So it's good for them to know. Thanks.
So the next speaker is going to be actually I never did get your name. You're in for Shannon Walters from the high school.
My name is Andrew Valley. I teach English at Burlington High School. Okay. For me, Larry Kramer is one of the most influential people of our contemporary era. And Larry Kramer is that in my eyes because he made so much change and progress within the LGBTQ plus movement, and he did that by really pushing back on the LGBTQ plus community to be better and be more compassionate, particularly gay men, to be more compassionate and to be more caring for each other. And for that, I will always love him. So, I'm reading a piece from his novel called Faggots, and I'll read just a little bit from the forward, and then I'll read just a few paragraphs from chapter 2 where he introduces his protagonist, Fred Lemish. Failing to reform urban Western queer customs in the late 1970s, Larry Kramer absorbed the abuse his vision received when, all too quickly, his dread began to realize itself in an epidemic that has proved far more ghastly than any critic could have imagined. He turned his unsleeping insight and energy into powerful social action, into the creation of eminently practical means of combating both the plague and society's refusal to acknowledge the plain humanity of its victims. No prior satirist known to me has waded blood-drenched into such useful work. The fact that a mind with the observational and analytic powers of Kramer's became the terrible and largely successful foe of federal, religious, and private sustainers, of the viciously passive witness of disaster, is still as astonishing as it is admirable. All of the same, even the most sympathetic reader may wonder if Kramer's public mission in the 1980s and 1990s would have succeeded so well if the authorities whom he attacked had actually read Faggots. Wouldn't the novel's characters have only confirmed the self-justifying stereotypes held by presidents, cabinet members, bishops, ministers, and private citizens, and sealed them tighter in their loathing and neglect? And who, reading Kramer, could have foreseen that the ego-wrapped community which he portrayed could have, for the better part of 2 decades, so memorably converted itself into a force for the most humbling kinds of nursing care and deathbed vigils? Is there a historical precedent for another group which transformed itself so quickly? But all live satire provokes such dilemmas, and the crackling presence of so many dark questions and Faggots should keep it alive for a great deal longer. Certainly, the community it attacked and all other communities of mindless sexual adventure, regardless of gender or aim, could continue to read it with baleful laughter and enduring profit. So this is from the beginning of chapter 2. It is his introduction of his protagonist, Fred Lemish. Fred Lemish was 39 years old. He was single still, though for many years he had claimed to want a lover. He had had 1 or 2, perhaps 9 or 10. He often had trouble defining precisely what constituted a lover, and not just a trick he had turned a number of times, even allowing for a tendency toward attempted reconstructions on Just Good Fucks or root canal work on vacation romances best left where found. But by any definition, none had lasted beyond a vague introductory offer. He usually blamed it on the other fellow and still maintained that he was alone against his will. Fred had a hairy chest, wide shoulders, at last a 30-inch waist, after years of a slight inner tube of fat amidships, love handles, where new introductions so annoyingly always placed their hands casually and greeting, in reality only prospecting the land beneath the shirt to judge how hard the terrain and hence how desirable before walking away, never to be heard from again, if the merchandise was too soft, too excessive, which in Fred's case it had been recently, plus those sturdy legs an embarrassing liability as a child. What other kid had fully formed calves like cantaloupes at the age of 10? Now at last accepted for the muscular bonus that they were, along with that hairy chest, now also useful as a marketable difference, which the same childhood of being, the only King Kong among years of hairless Greek statued schoolmates, had not allowed, plus the requisite mustache, now alas mingling black hair with strokes of gray, and also alas, the small but growing bald spot on the crown of his dark head, which no amount of Head Start vitamin with the mysterious ingredients or hair trigger Formula 6 available by mail from I. Magnin in Beverly Hills had applied nightly with a hot towel and left steaming on the scalp for 20 minutes, followed by a glass of warm milk and 2 additional capsules of minerals essential to the root's natural growth had alleviated. He had briefly attempted to camouflage the mustache and temples which Revlon's Fabulash, recommended in California by Frigger, he of rock-hard barreled chest, construction worker arms, and witty one-liners, and that infallible gift of his mouth, always winning at the "come into my parlor." A good friend he later discovered to have tricked with Pfeffer on the very day Pfeffer had returned to Fred for their second attempt at togetherness. The aroma from which, not to mention the resultant turgidity, he found sufficiently unpleasant to discontinue the effort. He belonged to 2 gyms and attended them regularly, alternating them to avoid monotony. At Sheridan Square, the magnificent Obsession Health Club, also known as Bodywork, but the mind doesn't, was a muscle build close to home with village faggots, a serious lot much concerned with hyperbolic results, to parade on Christopher Street, though they and their conversations, as everyone was she or Mary, and various were the opinions on opera, recipes, and yard goods, were a bit too bitchy queeny for Fred's taste. To him, they all connotated creeping, crepuscular, middle-aged dissatisfaction on the road to leather and other arcane sexual deviances, sacrosanct to the unloved, and he still had hope, if not their over-muscled definition. Most of the time, he used the 63rd Street West Side Y, jauntily known as the biggest gay bar in town, and much kickier than the Y's 23rd or 47th Street. And here he joined quipsters, a jolly, congenial lot, many of them now good friends. Frigger, when he was in LA, Gatsby, energetic Tarsh, the divine Bella, the city's famous lovers Josie and Dom Dom, follow the dapper Mickey, the 34-year-old flower child, Sweet Bo Peep, and his 3-mile jog and his hour of serious weightlifting. And how his muscles had appeared. His body reacted, his pecs and lats and delts took form, his love handles diminished. Frigger's suggestion of the waist sweater had worked. His stomach tightened, and he even had obliques. He'd now entered the fatless state of being in great shape, certainly better shape than any of his straight friends. How many of them worked out 7 days a week? And all was now obviously ready at last to lead on to consummation with Mr. Right. All those years of chunkery, was it to keep love away? For if a faggot bartered with his body, hadn't he best get his wampum in order?
Okay, our next reader is Abby, and Peter, you're up after that.
All right, I'd like to read something from one of my favorite books, Bless Me Ultima, by Rodolfo Anaya. And if anyone's ever read this book, you know that it was challenging in 2 ways to pick out a passage. Number 1, because there's so many good ones, and number 2, because they're all very, like, a little bit crazy. So I'm reading you a little bit from the 2nd chapter here, chapter Dos, and just a little bit to give you a taste. The main character in this book is a 6-year-old, just keep that in mind. A priest could have saved Lupido. Oh, why did my mother dream for me to be a priest? How would I ever wash away the stain of blood from the sweet waters of my river? I think at the time I began to cry because as I left the river brush and headed up the hills, I heard my sobs for the first time. It was also then that I heard the owl. Between my gasps for air and my sobs, I stopped and listened for its song. My heart was pounding and my lungs hurt, but a calmness had come over the moonlight night when I heard the hooting of Ultima's owl. I stood still for a long time. I realized that the owl had been with me throughout the night. It had watched over all that had happened on the bridge. Suddenly, the terrible, dark fear that had possessed me was gone. I looked at the house that my father and my brothers had built on the juniper-patched hill. It was quiet and peaceful in the blue night. The sky sparkled with 1,000,000 stars and the Virgin's horned moon, the moon of my mother's people, the moon of the Lunas. My mother would be praying for the soul of Lupito. Again the owl sang. Ultima's spirit bathed me with its strong resolution. I turned and looked across the river. Sunlight shone in the town. In the moonlight, I could make out the tower of the church, the schoolhouse top, and way beyond the glistening of the town's water tank. I heard the soft wail of a siren, and I knew the men would be pulling Lupito from the river. The river's brown waters would be stained with blood forever and ever and ever. In the autumn, I would have to go to school in the town, and in a few years, I would go to catechism lessons in the church. I shivered. My body began to hurt from the beating it had taken from the brush on the river. But what hurt me more was that I had witnessed for the first time the death of a man. My father did not like this town or its way. When we had first moved from Les Pasturas, we had lived in a rented house in the town. But every evening after work, he looked across the river to see the barren, empty hills, and finally he had bought a couple of acres and began building our house. Everyone told him he was crazy. That rocky, wild hill could sustain no life, and my mother was more than upset. She wanted to buy along the river where the land was fertile and there was water for plants and trees. But my father won the fight to be close to his llano, because truthfully, our hill was the beginning of the llano. From here, it stretched away as far as the eye could see to Las Pasturas and beyond. The men of the town had murdered Lupito, but he had murdered the sheriff. They said the war had made him crazy. The prayers for Lupito mixed into prayers for my brothers. So many different thoughts raced through my mind that I felt dizzy and very weary and sick. I ran the last of the way and slipped quietly into the house. I groped for the stair railing in the dark and felt a warm hand take mine. Startled, I look up into Ultima's brown, wrinkled face. "You knew," I whispered. I understood that she did not want to wake my mother. "See," she replied. "And the owl," I gasped. My mind searched for answers, but my body was so tired that my knees buckled and I fell forward. As small and thin as Ultima was, she had the strength to lift me in her arms and carry me into her room. She placed me on her bed, and then by the light of a small flickering candle, she mixed one of her herbs in a tin cup, held it over the flame to warm, then gave it to me to drink. "They killed Lupito," I said as I gulped the medicine. "I know," she nodded. She prepared a new potion. With this, she washed the cuts on my face and feet. "Will he go to hell?" I said. "That's not for us to say, Antonio." The war sickness was not taken out of him, and he did not know what he was doing. "And the men on the bridge, my father." "Men will do what they must," she answered. She sat on the bed by my side. Her voice was soothing, and the drink she had given me made me sleepy. The wild, frightening excitement in my body began to die. "The ways of men are strange and hard to learn," I heard her say. "Will I learn them?" I asked. I felt the weight on my eyelids. "You will learn much, and you will see much." I heard her faraway voice. I felt a blanket cover me, I felt safe in the warm sweetness of the room. Outside, the owl sang its dark questioning to the night, and I slept. Thanks.
This one's banned too. They have this really nice different Oh, thank you.
This is one of my favorite books. I guess it's a hopeful sign that the book I wanted to read was taken out. I wanted to read In the Night Kitchen by Maurice Sendak. Does anyone know that book? All right, great one. It was banned because there's a picture of a naked little boy. Shocking, I know. I don't know which way you take shocking, but Where the Wild Things was also banned, but I don't know why. Why Where the Wild Things Are? Does anyone know? Monsters? Okay, all right. Well, this is one of the great children's books of all time. There's only a handful of authors who have entered the pantheon of great books that will last forever. This Goodnight Moon, Curious George, maybe Babar, Madeline. There's not many. There's a handful of truly great books, and this is one of them. So it's a real honor to read this. I will mention that in this book there's echoes of the Odyssey for those of you who are familiar with that story, the voyage in and out. But we won't go too deeply into that symbolism today. I'll just read you the book. I'm very excited too that unlike some other people, I can read you the whole book. I don't have to read just an excerpt, the whole thing. One thing I will notice is that things get wilder, the pictures take over more and more of the page, so that's something you also might want to notice. Where the Wild Things Are, Stories and Pictures by Maurice Sendak. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another, his mother called him, what does his mother call him? Say it with me. Wild thing, yeah. And Max said, I'll eat you up. So he was sent to his bed without eating anything I will say that in more modern versions, Child Protective Services might be called in a situation like this, but this was long before that. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew. See, the pictures are getting bigger and grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through the night and day. And in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. There they are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth. Isn't that a great word? Gnashed. And rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. Till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all, and made him king of all wild things. And now, cried Max, let the wild rumpus start. And here it is. The pictures have taken over completely, as have the monsters. There they are. One more. Now stop, Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all the wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around from far away across the world, he smelled good things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." And Max said, "No." The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye and sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. If you're interested in more Maurice Sendak and his amazing career as a book illustrator and writer, just before he died, he had this amazing, powerful, emotional interview with Terry Gross on what's it called? Fresh Air, and that's still available as a podcast, just to see where he was coming from. One last thing in that interview and other interviews, he said that he modeled the monsters after his aunts and uncles, because he said they were scary but also funny. And that is the genius of this book. It is such an absolute fine line to make something that's right in between funny and scary. You know, he could have made them funnier and they wouldn't be so powerful. He could have made them scarier and that would have been a different book. But he just hit it perfectly with these monsters. And that's why this is such a wonderful book. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks for yes, improvising. Okay, I am the next reader, and Mike Disanto, for you're next after me. I'm reading The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. It has been banned and challenged for having explicit language, anti-American storylines. But I think this is one of my favorite books of the last few years, and we did it in our book club here at the library, and it was just a terrific discussion, and I love the way she writes. I will say that I am a white girl, and so I always get a little nervous reading, because it definitely has a little bit of a dialect. We spent the night at Uncle Carlos's house because the riot started again as soon as the sun went down. Somehow the store got spared. We should go to church and thank God for that, but Mama and I are too tired to sit through less than an hour of anything. Sakani wants to spend another day at Uncle Carlos's, so Sunday morning we return to Garden Heights without him. Right as we get off the freeway, we're met by a police roadblock. Only one lane of traffic isn't blocked by a patrol car, and officers talk to drivers before letting them pass through. Suddenly, it's as if someone grabbed my heart and twisted it. I swallow, can we get around them? Doubt it. They probably got these all around the neighborhood. Mama glances over at me and frowns. Munch, you okay? I grab my door handle. They can easily grab their guns and leave us like Khalil, all the blood in our bodies pooling on the street for everybody to see, our mouths wide open, our eyes staring at the sky, searching for God. Hey, Mama cups my cheek. Hey, look at me. I try to, but my eyes are filled with tears. I'm so sick of being this damn weak. Khalil may have lost his life, but I lost something too, and it pisses me off. It's okay, Mama says. We got this all right. Close your eyes if you have to. I do. Keep your eyes visible. Keep your hands visible. No sudden moves. Only speak when spoken to. The seconds drag by like hours. The officer asks Mama for her ID and proof of insurance, and I beg Black Jesus to get us home, hoping there won't be a gunshot as she searches through her purse. We finally drive off. See, baby, she said, everything's fine. Her words used to have power. If she said it was fine, it was fine. But after you've held two people as they took their last breaths, words like that don't mean shit anymore. I haven't let go of the door handle until we pull into the driveway. Daddy comes out and knocks on my window. Mama rolls it down for me. There go my girls, he smiles, but it fades into a frown. What's wrong? You about to go somewhere, baby? Mama asks, meaning they'll talk later. Yeah, gotta run to the warehouse and stock up. He taps my shoulder. I want to hang around with your daddy? I'll get you some ice cream, one of those big fat tubs that'll last about a month. I laugh, even though I don't feel like it. Daddy's talented like that. I don't need all that ice cream. I ain't say you needed it. When we get back, we can watch that Harry Potter shit you like so much. No. What? He says. Daddy, you're the worst person to watch Harry Potter with. The whole time you're talking about, I deepen my voice, why don't they shoot that nigga Voldemort? Yeah, it don't make sense that in all them movies and books, nobody thought to shoot him. If it's not that, Mama says, you're giving your Harry Potter is about gangs theory. It is, he says. Okay, so it is a good theory. Daddy claims that Hogwarts houses are really gangs. They have their own colors, their own hideouts, and they are always riding for each other like gangs. Harry, Ron, and Hermione never snitch on one another, just like gangbangers. Death Eaters even have matching tattoos. And look at Voldemort. They're scared to say his name. Really? That he must not be named stuff is like giving him a street name. That's some gang-banging shit right there. Y'all know that make a lot of sense, Daddy says. Just 'cause they was in England don't mean they wasn't gang-banging. He looks at me. So you down to hang out with your old man today or what? I'm always down to hang out with him. We roll through the streets, 2-pack blasting through the subwoofers. He's rapping about keeping your head up, and Daddy glances at me as he raps along, like he's telling me the same thing Tupac is. I know you're fed up, baby, he nudges my chin, but keep your head up. He sings with the chorus about how things will get easier, and I don't know if I want to cry because that's really speaking to me right now, or crack up because Daddy's singing is so horrible. Daddy said, that was a deep dude right there, real deep. They don't make rappers like that no more. You're showing your age, Daddy? Whatever, it's the truth. Mike Disanto, the owner of Phoenix Books. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, thank goodness I can take this off for a minute. I want to thank the Fletcher Free Library and Barbara for inviting me to do this. I'm very honored to be up here today. The book that I chose is one that formed my youth, if you will, Fahrenheit 451. And when I read it, I was actually older than 8th grade, which is where most of the banning seems to be focused. But it did inform some of my more obstreperous moments in college and the like as far as nonconformist behavior. Of course, now I'm a fully fledged capitalist. So I want to read two things that are not from the book first. One was a review by Orville Prescott from the New York Times, and I do this because he does a better job summarizing the theming than I might today. So he wrote, the title of the short novel refers to the temperature at which book paper burns. This is the story of a fireman whose job was not to put out fires, but to start them. In answer to alarms put out by informers, fire companies burned books in the houses of the lawbreakers who concealed them. Books were false, useless, and only made people unhappy. It was eccentric to think, psychotic, to enjoy the beauties of nature. Normal people doped themselves with synthetic entertainment. Mr. Bradbury's account of this insane world, which bears many alarming resemblances to our own, is fascinating. And as we read this today, I would like you to keep in mind the day and time that we're living in, and also at the same time remember that Mr. Bradbury wrote most of this in the early 1950s, and this is what's relevant when he wrote something about why and how he wrote the book. So this is from Mr. Bradbury. So suddenly, here I am, writing an angry short novel because I lived that particular year in 1950, at the time at the end of World War II, when, and just correct me if this sounds familiar, when politics in the United States were going through a very difficult period, when we had Joseph McCarthy, the strange senator, on our hands, who was trying to browbeat us and trying to scare us. So it was a combination of many things that went into my anger and caused me to write the novel. So just like the gentleman who did the Maurice Sendak book, I had a hard time finding exactly what it was that made people upset with this novel as I started to reread it. And it turns out that there is, of course, a Bible being burned in it, and so that led some people to get upset. There's a few cuss words like bastard, and that seemed to upset some people. And then I think in general, because the book tries to upset the status quo, that all of the status quo supporters were upset that their children were reading about that. So it's just, nothing does seem to change, does it? And what's that old quote about history repeating itself? So, there was a character in the book, Montag is the name of the fireman, but then there's a character named Captain Beede, who is maybe the most chilling thing I've read about in a while without being violent at the same time. So Beede is a captain in the firehouse where Montag is a fireman. He's come over to Montag's house because he suspects, quite rightly, that Montag has been stealing books and not burning them, and may not be as loyal to the concept as he used to be. So here's some bits about that. Beede peered at the smoke pattern he'd put out into the air. Picture it. 19th century man with his horses, dogs, carts, slow motion. Then, in the 20th century, speed up your camera. Books cut shorter. Condensations, digests, tabloid. Everything boils down to the gag, the snap ending. Classics cut to 15-minute radio shows, then cut again to fill a 2-minute book column, winding up at last as a 10 or 12-line dictionary resume. I exaggerate, of course. The dictionaries were for reference, but many were those whose sole knowledge of Hamlet was a 1-page digest in a book that claimed, now at last, you can read all the classics and keep up with your neighbors. Do you see? Out of the nursery into the college and back to the nursery. There's your intellectual pattern for the past 5 centuries or more. And then he goes on to say, and this may also be relevant, school is shortened, discipline relaxed, philosophies, histories, languages dropped, English and spelling gradually neglected, finally almost completely ignored. Life is immediate. The job counts and pleasure lies all about after work. Why learn anything? And then as Montag starts his little travail and walk through life, he comes across a professor named Faber. And then I just discovered this. Faber, of course, is the name of a pen company which we still sell in our stores today. It still exists. And Montag, turns out, is the name of a paper manufacturing company. So Bradbury claimed that he only did this subconsciously, and I'm not going to argue with him. He's passed away. So the man Faber is very reticent and fearful of getting involved with things. So he writes or states this when Montag approaches him with a Bible. Faber sniffed the book. Do you know that books smell like nutmeg or some spice from a foreign land? I loved to smell them when I was a boy. Lord, there were a lot of lovely books once before we let them go. Faber turned the pages. Mr. Montag, you are looking at a coward. I saw the way things were going a long time back, and I said nothing. I am one of the innocents who could have spoken up and out when no one would listen to the guilty, but I did not speak, and thus became guilty myself. And when finally they set the structure to burn the books using the firemen, I grunted a few times and subsided, for there were no others grunting or yelling with me by then. Now it's too late. Faber closed the Bible. Well, suppose you tell me why you came here. So that's it. I just love this book. Thank you. Oops. Do I clean this now, Barbara?
Oh, no, I'll take it.
You'll do it.
I'll take
All
care of
right.
it. Yep. Thank you. I love that book.
Our next reader is Amy Mellencamp. who is a retired educator here, many of you know, and she is also the chair of our library commission.
Good afternoon. According to the American Library Association, Harry Potter books are some of the most banned books in the country due to the focus on witchcraft and wizardry. For instance, in a school in Nashville, Tennessee, just this past year, the Harry Potter series were banned because they included magic, such as spells which can conjure up evil spirits. Well, as the sales of over 500 million books of the Harry Potter series show, J.K. Rowling's creativity has really captured the imagination and the hearts of readers across the world. So what do you think? Here is a taste from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederate of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean? They await my owl?" "Galopin Gorgons, that reminds me," said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse. And from yet another pocket inside his overcoat, he pulled an owl, a real, live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. "Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well. Hagrid." Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in its beak, went to the door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where was I?" said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. "He's not going," he said. Hagrid grunted. "I'd like to see what a great muggle like you stop him," he said. "A what?" said Harry, interested. "A muggle," said Hagrid. "It's what we call non-magic folk like him. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on." "Well, we swore when we took him in we'd put a stop to that rubbish," said Uncle Vernon. "Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed." "You knew?" said Harry. "You knew I'm a wizard?" "Knew?" shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. "Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be, my dratted sister being what she was? Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every vacation with her pockets full of frogs, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in their family." She stopped to draw a deep breath and then went ranting on. It seemed like she'd been wanting to say all this for years. "Then she met that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you, and of course I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you." Harry had gone very white. As soon as he found his voice, he said, Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash. Car crash, roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back to their corner. How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter not knowing his own story when every kid in our world knows his name. But why? What happened? Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. I never expected this, he said in a low, worried voice. I had no idea when Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting hold of you. How much you didn't know. Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing. He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. Well, it's best to know as much as I can tell you, mind. I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it. He sat down, stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, It begins, I suppose, with a person called... But it's incredible you don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows. Who? Well, I don't like saying the name if I can help it. No one does. Why not? Gulp and gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad. As bad as you could go. Worse than worse. His name was... Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down, Harry suggested. No, can't spell it. All right, Voldemort. Hagrid shuddered. Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard about 20 years ago now started looking for followers. Got him too. Some were afraid, some just wanted a bit of his power. Because he was getting himself power, all right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust. Didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taking over. Of course, some stood up to him and he killed them. Horribly. One of the only safe places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you-know-who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school, not just then anyway. Now, your mom and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you-know-who never tried to get them on his side before. Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore, who didn't want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted him out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you were all living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your home and... Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty, spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. Sorry, he said, but it's that sad. Knew your mom and dad and nicer people you couldn't find. Anyway, you know who killed him, and then, and this is the real mystery of the thing, he tried to kill you. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose, or maybe he just liked killing by then, but he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? That was no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful, evil curse touches you. Took care of your mom and dad in your house, even, but it didn't work on you, and that's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill him. No one except you. And he killed some of the best witches and wizards of the age. The McKinnons, the Bones, the Pruitts, and you was only a baby. And you lived. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw again the blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he had ever remembered it before. And he remembered something else for the first time in his life. A high, cold, cruel laugh. Thank you. Oh, I can do that.
Well, our last reader is Charles, is it Digritz? And from Hunt Middle School? You're the school librarian there,
Yes.
right? Oh, great. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Charles. I'm the librarian at Hunt Middle School here in Burlington. And so thanks for having this event. And I just wanted to acknowledge that sometimes we say, hey, we're celebrating Banned Books Week, but we're not really celebrating. There's nothing to celebrate here. Like, this is just a week where we recognize the reality and harm that banned and challenged books can have on our students and on our community. And that's probably nowhere more true, or at least that LGBTQ texts are disproportionately represented. Even though titles published every year, LGBTQ characters do not make up half of the characters. They make up more than half of the banned books. And that's why today I've chosen to read from the book I Am Jazz, a story of a trans girl. It also happens to be among my two daughters' favorites. So try that. See if I can do the picture thing. I Am Jazz. There we go. Here it is. I Am Jazz. For as long as I can remember, my favorite color has been pink. My second favorite color is silver. And my third favorite color is green. Here are some of my other favorite things: dancing, singing, backflips, drawing, soccer, swimming, makeup, and pretending to be a pop star. Most of all, I love mermaids. Sometimes I even wear a mermaid tail in the pool. My best friends are Samantha and Casey. We always have fun together. We like high heels, princess gowns, cartwheels, and trampolines. But I'm not really exactly like Casey and Samantha. I have a girl brain, but a boy body. This is called transgender. I was born this way. When I was very little, my mom would say, "You're such a good boy." And I would say, "No, Mama, good girl." At first, my family was confused. They always thought of me as a boy. As I got a little older, I hardly ever played with trucks or tools or superheroes, only princesses and mermaid costumes. My brothers told me that was girl stuff. I kept right on playing. My sister says I was always talking to her about my girl thoughts and my girl dreams and how one day I'd be a beautiful lady. She would giggle and say, "You're a funny kid." Sometimes my parents would let me wear my sister's dresses around the house, but whenever we went out, I had to put on my boy clothes again. This made me mad. Still, I never gave up trying to convince them. Pretending I was a boy felt like a lie. Then one amazing day, everything changed. Mom and Dad took me to meet a new doctor who asked lots and lots of questions. Afterward, the doctor spoke to my parents and I heard the word transgender for the very first time. That night, at bedtime, my parents both hugged me and said, "We understand now. Be who you are. We love you no matter what." And this made me smile and smile and smile. Mom and Dad told me I could start wearing girl clothes to school, growing my hair long. They even let me change my name to Jazz. Being Jazz felt much more like being me. Mom said that being Jazz would make me different from other kids at school, but that different was okay. What's important, she said, is that I'm happy with who I am. Being Jazz caused some other people to be confused too, like the teachers at school. At the beginning of the year, they wanted me to use boys' bathroom, play on the boys' team in gym class, but that didn't feel normal to me at all. I was so happy when the teachers changed their minds. I can't imagine not playing soccer on the same team as Casey and Samantha. Even today, there are kids who tease me, call me my boy name, or ignore me altogether. This makes me feel crummy. Then I remember that the kids who get to know me usually want to be my friend. They say I'm one of the nicest girls at school. I don't mind being different. Different is special. I think that what matters most is what a person is like on the inside. And inside, I'm happy, I'm having fun, I'm proud, I am Jazz. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming and being a part of this banned book event, and a special thank you to all of our readers, and also thank you to the weather for holding out. Take care.